Imagine this for a second, a gray, lifeless afternoon in a distant future. In the middle of a blinding snowstorm and crumbling concrete walls, a child stands staring at a rusted information plaque. Tourists quietly walk through the cold, empty ruins of Washington, D.C. The White House is nothing more than a broken concrete shell. Grass grows up through the cracked floor of the Oval Office. A tour guide raises his hand, points at the ruins, and says calmly, "Once upon a time, this was the capital of a superpower called the United States of America. Back then, people thought they would last forever." Sounds like some apocalyptic Netflix show, right? But 2,000 years ago, if you stood in the ruins of the Roman Empire and said something similar, the Romans would have laughed you off just the same. Rome didn't believe it could fall. They had the strongest army, the richest cities, the most advanced legal system, roads stretching across continents. They even called the entire Mediterranean our sea. To them, Rome wasn't just a country, it was the world. Sound familiar? Today, a lot of Americans feel the same way. We're the superpower. We have the biggest economy, the strongest military, the most advanced technology. We're too big to fail. Rome thought exactly the same. This video isn't just a deep dive into the entire history of the Roman Empire. It's a warning, because the story of Rome isn't just about people in togas a long time ago. It's the trailer for every superpower that thinks it can't be touched, including the one many of you are living in right now. So let's rewind. How did a small town on the banks of the Tiber River become the center of the world? How did that world slowly crack from the inside until its last emperor was just a frightened boy with a borrowed name? And more importantly, are we walking down that same road? Just comforting ourselves by saying this era is different? If you keep watching, by the end of this video, you may never hear the phrase, "Rome wasn't built in a day," with the same innocent ears again. If you rewind all the way back to the beginning, Rome didn't have the Colosseum, didn't have steel legions, didn't have the glow of a superpower. It only had some rough little huts along the banks of the Tiber, and a founding story that sounds almost like an American-style myth. According to legend, two brothers, Romulus and Remus, were raised by a she-wolf in the wilderness. When they grew up, they decided to build a new city, the future capital of their own. But just like many founding stories, including America's, power is usually written in blood. Conflict explodes between the two brothers. Who gets to lay the first stone? Who will be the real founding father? In the end, Remus dies. Romulus names the city after himself, Rome.
I named the city after myself, Rome.
It sounds like a Marvel-style origin story, but it hits something true about every civilization. The beginning is always messy, chaotic, and full of struggle. If we set the legend aside, modern research paints an even more interesting picture. The land where Rome rose, Etruria and Latium, wasn't a mighty city, but a cluster of small villages scattered over low hills. No national flag, no standing army, no grand dream of ruling the world. Just tiny communities forced to band together, because if they didn't, stronger tribes would swallow them whole and erase them. Out of that pressure to survive, something great began to form. Whether you're watching this from Texas, California, New York, or Pennsylvania, picture this for a moment. Early Rome looked a lot like the original 13 American colonies. Small, fragile, unsure of its future. But just like those first Americans, they really only had one question. How do we survive in a world full of giants? Their answer became the very first brick in one of the greatest civilizations in human history. When Rome shifted from kings to a republic, They did something modern Americans will find strangely familiar. They wrote a system designed so no one could hold on to power for too long. No vague philosophy, no royal bloodlines passing the crown from father to son. Instead, a political machine built on rules that feel very Washington, D.C. The Senate, the ancient version of a Senate, a council made up of the richest, most influential families, the old money families, deciding the direction of the state. Patricians equals the elite class holding power for generations. Plebeians equals commoners, merchants, farmers, the majority of Rome's population. Rome was not a perfect democracy, but for the ancient world, the very act of writing a system to limit power was a bold leap that many modern countries still struggle with. Every year, Rome elected 2 consuls. They shared power equally and kept each other in check. If one of them stepped out of line, the other had the right to veto. It's such a clever design that Americans today might do a double take. Power spread out, short terms, and no one allowed to become too strong. It was basically checks and balances in the 5th century BC. Whenever Rome faced a major war or a serious crisis, they allowed the appointment of a dictator, one person with full emergency powers, but only for 6 months. No extending the term, no just 1 more year. When time was up, he had to step down. That's the kind of idea any modern country would kill to have working perfectly. Looking at Republican Rome, you see one core belief. They knew human beings are dangerous when given too much power. But they also knew it's dangerous if no one has enough power to solve a crisis. That's the eternal tug-of-war between freedom and stability, democracy and concentrated strength, idealism and harsh reality. It's the same argument Americans still have every election cycle. Rome tried to build a system that power couldn't easily twist. But any system that puts power in human hands will eventually be bent by human ambition. And that's exactly when Rome began to slip off its original trajectory. Once the Republican machine started running smoothly, Rome did what every rising great power eventually does. It stopped looking inward and started looking beyond its borders. And its first real collision wasn't with some minor tribe, but with the richest commercial empire in the Mediterranean at the time, Carthage. If Rome was the land monster with its iron legions, then Carthage was the king of the sea, a trading superpower controlling the sea lanes, like a mashup of Phoenicia plus Wall Street. Rome, born out of farmers, land, and soldiers, looked at Carthage and saw both a jackpot and a mortal threat. The result? 3 legendary conflicts, the Punic Wars, stretching over nearly a century. In the Second Punic War, Carthage played its most dangerous card, Hannibal. Hannibal is the kind of commander American viewers can mentally place next to names like Napoleon, Alexander, or Washington, a true military genius. He didn't just attack Rome, he humiliated Rome. Instead of hitting the edges of Roman territory, Hannibal did what no one expected. He led an entire army with war elephants across the Alps. To a modern American audience, that sounds like a CGI sequence from a Hollywood blockbuster. To the Romans, it was a real-time nightmare. Hannibal tore through Italy, one victory after another. Roman armies crushed again and again. The Republic shook to its core. This is the kind of moment where a lot of empires in history snap and never recover. But Rome was different. Why didn't Rome collapse? Rome didn't beat Hannibal with a dramatic, last-minute movie comeback battle. They won with grit and the ability to learn. They absorbed defeat, accepted heavy losses, avoided direct confrontation when they weren't ready, and slowly learned to fight Carthaginian style until they could finally flip the board. When the Punic Wars were over, the outcome was brutal. Carthage was wiped off the map. Around 200,000 people were dead. 50,000 were sold into slavery. The city was looted and burned. And Rome? Rome now controlled the entire Western Mediterranean. For an American viewer, you can think of it this way. Rome had just taken over every critical shipping lane in the region, like a superpower locking down both the Pacific and Atlantic trade routes today. That's when Rome officially switched into superpower mode phase 1. Sound familiar? A superpower holding vital trade routes, projecting its military everywhere, convinced it's the center of the world. Not just conquering land, but conquering ideas. Rome didn't stop with Carthage. They turned east, toward Macedonia and Greece. They defeated the successor kingdoms of Alexander the Great, absorbed their territories into the empire, and even more importantly, absorbed their culture. Greek philosophy became the operating system of the Roman elite. Greek art and architecture became the standard of beauty. Greek methods of reasoning seeped into Roman law and politics. Rome didn't just conquer land. Rome conquered ideas. That's the secret every superpower should pay attention to, including the United States. Rome became a superpower not just because of its legions, but because it knew how to learn from others, even from its enemies. Any empire that only says, "We're number one, we don't need to learn from anyone," usually doesn't stay number one for very long. Rome entered the 1st century BC like an unbeatable giant. Its territory stretched wide, and gold, silver, and slaves poured into the city like a flood. From the outside, it looked like no force on earth could ever bring Rome down. But here's the problem. Rome didn't crack from the outside. Rome cracked from the inside. Around 100 BC, Rome became incredibly rich, incredibly fast. And like every superpower that's ballooned too quickly, a pattern showed up. Political instability spiraled upward. The gap between rich and poor stretched to a dangerous breaking point. A small group of elites, the patricians, the old money families, kept a tight grip on the land, the resources, and every key decision in the Senate. Meanwhile, ordinary people, plebeians, dispossessed farmers, veterans returning home empty-handed, started to realize a bitter truth. We fight, we die on the battlefield, but the spoils of war don't belong to us. The bigger the empire grew, the thicker the air of injustice became. In that crisis, a new kind of figure appeared, the men history calls reformers. People brave enough to stand up and say, land must be given back to veterans. Fields must be shared with the poor. Corruption and elite power must be checked. And the price they paid was almost always blood. Some were stabbed in the street. Some were beaten to death in front of a crowd. Others simply disappeared in the middle of political conspiracies. Every time one of these people fell, Rome didn't just lose a single person. It lost another piece of its republican soul. From that point on, a terrifying rule took shape. Anyone who touched the interests of the elite was removed. Anyone who spoke for the poor was turned into a threat. The system that was supposed to protect the republic was now being used to protect the privileges of a small minority. And when a nation can no longer fix itself from the inside, it reaches for the only tool left: violence. Civil wars, mutinies, assassinations. Bit by bit, Rome learned a destructive habit, settling every disagreement with blood. No enemy needed to be at the gates. This was an empire that had already started stabbing itself. When Rome was drowning in division and its faith in the system was falling apart, one man rose up like a supernova in the Roman sky. A man worshipped by his soldiers, loved by the poor, feared by his enemies, and so terrifying to the elites, they were losing sleep over him. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar. The Gallic Wars, how Caesar became Rome's biggest star. Caesar marched his legions into Gaul and launched one of the greatest military campaigns in human history. He didn't just win, he won every battle. He didn't just command, he inspired. To his soldiers, he was the kind of commander who slept where they slept, slogged through the mud with them, stood with them on the front line. To the poor, he was a hero, a symbol of hope. the only man bold enough to say, ordinary Romans deserve more than this. Caesar wasn't just a general. He was an ancient world celebrity, a symbol, a political superstar. The first triumvirate, a power deal straight out of a mafia movie. But to become the biggest name in Rome, Caesar had to sign a secret deal, a power arrangement that sounds straight out of a mafia film. He teamed up with the two other most powerful men in Rome. Pompey, a famous general backed by the elite, Crassus, the richest man in Rome, a guy with enough money to buy half the city. Together they formed the first triumvirate, a shadow alliance carving up power between the three of them, leaving no real voice for anyone else. At that point, Rome wasn't truly ruled by the Republic anymore. It was ruled by three bosses. Then the alliance fell apart. Crassus died. Pompey shifted to the side of the Senate, and the Senate issued an order. Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. On paper, it sounded like a simple legal command. In reality, it was a political death sentence. If he returned without his army, he would be prosecuted and very likely killed. That night, Caesar stood on the banks of the Rubicon, a small river, but the legal boundary of Rome. Cross it, it will betray the Republic. Turn back, it will accept his own death. He looked at the dark water and spoke the words that echoed through history. Alla jacta est. The die is cast.
Alea jacta est. The die is cast.
And then he crossed. It was one of those rare moments in history when a single human being placed himself above the law. Civil war when Caesar took on the entire system. Civil war erupted. Rome split in two. Those who believed in Caesar and those who believed in the Republic. In the end, Caesar defeated Pompey at the Battle of Pharsalus. Pompey fled to Egypt and was killed the moment he arrived. In that exact moment, Rome crossed a line it had sworn it would never cross. A general had become more beloved, more powerful than the Republic itself. Now pause and imagine this as an American. If one day the United States had a general who was wildly popular, won every war, and promised that only he could save the country, how would you feel? Reassured or terrified? That was the question Rome had to face. And it's the same question every superpower, including the United States, eventually has to answer. March 44 BC. The air in Rome was thick like the sky right before a storm breaks. In the marble halls of the Senate, a group of men was preparing to do the most terrifying thing a republic can ever do. They decided to kill the most famous man in Rome. The irony? They didn't see themselves as traitors. They thought they were heroes. In their eyes, Caesar was no longer the hero of Gaul, the man who had redrawn the map of the Mediterranean. He was a threat, a general so beloved, so powerful, that his influence was slipping beyond the control of any institution. And to these senators, if Caesar lived, the Republic would die. So in their desperate logic, to save the Republic, Caesar had to die. Sometimes when a system is collapsing, its last reflex is violence. That day, Caesar walked into the Senate meeting like any other day. He had no idea every exit had already been cut off. All the men he had once sat with, laughed with, debated with, were now hiding daggers beneath their togas. They approached him, pretending to present a petition. Then suddenly, one man grabbed his cloak. Caesar turned. A blade flashed, then a second, a third, a fourth. In seconds, the entire chamber turned into a storm of steel. 23 stab wounds, blood splattered across the marble floor. And in the middle of that living hell, Caesar saw the most familiar face of all, Brutus, the man he had loved like a son, and the words that have echoed for more than 2,000 years. Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus? Caesar collapsed at the foot of a statue of Pompey, the man who had once been his ally, then his rival. It was a death that was political, deeply personal, and symbolic of a whole civilization tearing itself apart. The assassins walked out of the Senate convinced they had just saved Rome from a tyrant, but they were wrong, completely wrong. History would later remember them as the men who destroyed the very thing they claimed to protect. Because by killing Caesar, they didn't kill dictatorship, they opened the door for it. Right after his death, Rome fell into a power vacuum, into chaos, into civil war. And in the end, the man who rose to the top was not a limited Caesar bound by law, but Rome's first true emperor, Augustus. Caesar died, the Republic died with him, and the empire was born, out of the blood of the very man they thought they were stopping. When Caesar fell, Rome thought the tyrant was dead and the Republic had been saved. But his death didn't close the story. It opened a brand new stage with a player even sharper, smarter, and more dangerous than Caesar himself. A 19-year-old kid, Octavian, Caesar's legal heir. And the man history would remember by a different name, Augustus. Right after Caesar's assassination, Octavian teamed up with Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and close friend, Lepidus, a powerful figure in the western provinces. The three of them formed the Second Triumvirate, a more brutal, blood-stained sequel to the first power trio. This time, they didn't pretend. They had one clear goal: hunt down, crush, and punish everyone involved in Caesar's murder. The Battle of Philippi in 42 BC marked the final end of the so-called defenders of the Republic. The two main ringleaders both committed suicide. Rome now belonged to the Triumvirate. After their victory, the empire was carved up. Octavian controlled the west. Mark Antony ruled the east. Lepidus was quietly pushed out of the game by Octavian. And that's when things got dangerous, because Cleopatra entered the scene. Cleopatra wasn't just the queen of Egypt. To Roman eyes, she was the embodiment of the foreign threat, Eastern intrigue, a powerful woman who could bend Roman men to her will. If you want an American parallel, Cleopatra was like a foreign power trying to influence national politics. And when Mark Antony fell in love with her, Octavian saw a golden opportunity: turn Antony into a traitor in the eyes of Rome. He launched one of the first large-scale political PR campaigns in history. Antony has sold his soul to a foreign queen. Cleopatra wants to be queen of Rome. Rome is being threatened from within, and the Roman public ate it up. Battle of Actium, the showdown that made the Roman Empire, 31 BC. Actium, a naval battle that would decide the fate of the ancient world. On one side, Octavian's fleet. On the other, the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra. The result, Antony was utterly crushed. He and Cleopatra fled back to Egypt, and eventually both committed suicide. The stage of power was now cleared for one man only, Octavian. And here comes the genius of Octavian. He didn't call himself King Roman's hated monarchy. He didn't label himself dictator. Caesar had died under that title. Instead, he did something far smarter. He handed a bit of power back to the Senate, on paper at least. He called himself princeps, first citizen, the guy at the front, but equal to every Roman. He crafted the image of a father of the nation. And most importantly, he took a new name: Augustus, the honored one, the revered, the sacred. It was a masterclass in branding. He never called himself a king, but his power surpassed that of any king before him. That was the moment the Roman Republic died, and almost no one realized it had happened. Under Augustus and the emperors who followed, Rome entered the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace that lasted nearly 200 years. Rome became the center of the world. An empire with structure, borders, laws, and a flawless public image. Augustus didn't destroy the Republic with raw violence. He did something far more effective. He made Rome willingly hand it over to him. That is the highest tier of power, when people surrender freedom, and thank you for taking it. The Pax Romana, almost 200 years of relative stability, looked like a golden age that would never end. But even in that best period, Rome was already showing signs of a disease that didn't come from outside. Not from barbarian cavalry, not from foreign navies, but from the people sitting on the throne. After Augustus, Tiberius took power. He ruled during the very period when Jesus was crucified, a detail that makes American viewers immediately lock in with Roman history. Tiberius wasn't insane, but he trusted no one. He pulled back into the shadows and ruled by fear. Fear of betrayal, fear of losing power, fear of his own machine. From that point on, Rome began to feel something unsettling. We're still strong on the outside, but inside we're getting colder. Then came the names everyone associates with Roman madness. Caligula, Nero. Caligula the emperor who, according to legend, wanted to make his horse a consul. That story may be exaggerated, but no one invents that kind of rumor about you for no reason. Nero, remembered as the symbol of cruelty and decay. He killed his mother, killed his wife, killed anyone who annoyed him, and was rumored to have burned Rome and blamed the Christians. Not every detail can be confirmed 100%, but history doesn't cast you as the poster child for mad emperor, unless you did something seriously wrong. The scary part is this. These men weren't enemies who broke into Rome. They were men Rome chose to put on its own shoulders. In 69 AD, Rome went through a year that would make any American shiver. 4 emperors took turns ruling in just 12 months. Legions, palace guards, generals, everyone had their own candidate. At one point, the Praetorian Guard itself, the unit that was supposed to protect the emperor, started playing kingmaker, toppling one ruler, installing another, all based on their own interests. If you picture the US military stepping directly into the political arena, deciding who gets to sit in the Oval Office, you'll have a sense of how chaotic Rome had become. The Flavians and the good emperors. Rome saves itself, but not its soul. Rome didn't die right away. Vespasian pulled the empire out of the immediate chaos. Trajan pushed Rome to its greatest territorial extent. Hadrian shifted from expansion to consolidation. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, ruled with both sword and wisdom. It was a rare stretch where Rome actually had leaders any modern nation would kill to have. But that's exactly the problem. Once these exceptional men were gone, the system couldn't produce more people like them. The throne gradually fell into the hands of men who lacked competence, character, and basic discipline. Rome's real disease wasn't a few crazy emperors. The real disease was this: a system that could no longer select the right people to lead. If the age of Augustus was Rome's coronation moment, then the 3rd century was when Rome strapped itself into an electric chair and kept flipping the switch. No foreign army did that to them. Rome did it to itself. Over the span of about 100 years, Rome went through more than 25 emperors, and most of them didn't die at the hands of foreign enemies, but by assassination, coups, or rebellion. Every few years, sometimes every few months, a new man would suddenly appear and call himself Augustus, a general lifted up by his troops, a rich man who bought the loyalty of a legion, a provincial commander who decided, why not me? There was no stable succession, no long-term vision. Rome stopped being an empire and started looking like a giant corporation that's always in the middle of firing its CEO. When you string together the entire history of the Roman Empire, more than 1,000 years of rise and fall, a pretty terrifying pattern appears. Rome rose when it was humble and united just to survive. Rome flourished when it was willing to learn, stayed disciplined, and constantly reform itself. Rome rotted when it got rich too fast, when inequality exploded, when politics turned into factional warfare, when the military stepped into civilian power, and when violence replaced conversation. No foreign enemy defeated Rome. Rome dropped itself. That's why this story isn't just about the past. It's a gigantic mirror held up in front of every superpower that thinks it's untouchable. And in that mirror, the United States, whether it wants to or not, can see its own outline. Rome once believed it was too big to fail, but no empire is immune to division, corruption, or complacency. So the real question is no longer, is America like Rome? The real question, harder to swallow, is, what chapter is America in the Roman story, and how many chapters are left before the ending? And now I want to hear from you. In your view, what is the single most important lesson from Rome's rise and fall for the United States today? What could actually help a superpower avoid walking the same road Rome did? Honestly, what stage of Rome do you think America looks like right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because you are the one living inside this century's empire, and history is always whispering to those willing to listen. Who knows, the way we live and the choices we make today might be the very thing that decides whether that opening scene of a ruined Washington stays pure fiction forever, or one day becomes the script A tour guide reads out loud to a group of school kids in some distant future.